I thought I'd share with you this morning about storms, because there's a couple of big storms in my life happening right now. We all go through storms. Some of them are constant. I know one constant storm in Grandma's life, when her dad was still with us, was that he was in and out of the hospital with really bad asthma. And they thought he was going to die at least a million times. And he ended up hanging on until he was 94, 92. Sometimes kind of storms pass over. And sometimes they stick around in a lot of ways. But I thought I'd start with something funny. Many of you know that I'm single, and sometimes I try not to be because I like to test my faith and think that miracles happen. So I was talking with this girl, and I was talking about myself and describing things, and I said that physically I'm built a little bit like a football player, not the buff quarterback, but the chubby guys in front of him who are pushing the defenders away, and she thought that was neat, and so I said you could probably, I've been doing a lot of deadlifting, and you could probably comfortably sit on my shoulders if you wanted to. And she said, no, you wouldn't want to do that. I would describe myself as curvy. So I thought I would go for a joke there because, that's just the kind of guy I am. So I said, I love a girl with curves. It just means that you have a nice apartment available if we ever need to sign a 9-month lease. Yeah. Like a 9, have a baby.
I got it, Alan.
That's good. You thought it was funny. She thought it was absolutely freakish and horrible, and I haven't heard from her since, so I'm pretty sure that I'm still single.
Okay, so maybe next time don't use that line on a girl.
Sure, yeah.
I think so too.
Sometimes you get bored of a conversation and you want to move things along. This past weekend was Mission Fest at Church of the Rock. That's a thing where lots of Christian organizations get together and kind of advertise different programs, whether it's Bible colleges or seminaries or different projects that are going on around the world. Like translating Bibles and this and that. And then they had speakers from various parts of the world, some of the missionaries come from active war zones, like Somalia or Afghanistan. Things where there's a large percentage of the population that is hostile to Christianity and to the message, and so they have different speakers on different days, and I didn't really go that much this past weekend because I work nights, and working nights is enough for me. But I came yesterday morning, or not morning, yesterday evening, and there was an interesting speaker from Somalia, and he told this story because he had spent years ministering to people in Somalia, and there's been a civil war there and a lot of goings on, and he told this story about how something like he felt he was already in Somalia, but there was a place in Somalia, there was like a war zone where no white person had gone since the 70s, and he felt that he was called to go there and do something. He wasn't exactly sure what that something was, but he prayed about it, and he knew that he was called to go there. He had already brought his family with him. They were in a dangerous part of Somalia, And so he was going to go into this sort of demilitarized kind of zone, and see what God was going to do. And then he was networking with some people, and then they had given him this list of names. And apparently there was a group that they had evangelized, maybe like in the 70s, that these missionaries had gone into this particular area, and they had were able to reach some people there, and they had to leave because it was too dangerous. So this guy, I forget his name, but his last name was Rifkin. So Rifkin goes on this journey. He goes into this area, and he over the course of some time, he's got his guides with him, and his guys seem to notice these 5 people that are kind of tracking them wherever they're going. There's these five Somalians that are sort of watching wherever they go. And before he had gone into this region, he had been given a list of 5 names, because they were the 5 people who were part of this reached people group in this area. And this guy says to him, if you can find these 5 guys from way back when, because they were part of a different village. They were part of this village, and we haven't heard from them in many years. So if you find them in this area, this area was the last place they were ever seen, and we haven't heard from them at all. So anyway, to make a long story short, these 5 guys that are tracking him end up being the list, the exact same people with the names and they ask him, when they first meet, are you the man? And he's really confused, like, what kind of man? And they said, well, are you the man? So they get to talking, and they find out that these guys were actually from that these guys just coincidentally happened to be the ones that on this list of names, and that they thought that Christianity was just some kind of like, they weren't really sure, because all their Christian friends were killed in that area, the ones who the ones who got evangelized. So they had to keep their faith a secret, and they weren't sure exactly who they were praying to. They just knew that these sincere missionaries had come there, and they had shared the word, and that they were praying to this guy named Jesus. And they weren't sure, because it was such a dark nation, in the sense that there was no Christianity in the place where they were, and they weren't even sure if this. They thought it was just, in a way, they thought it was just some myth that they heard about like 30 years ago. So when this guy came, and he was the only white person they'd seen in decades. They thought that he was sent there to remind them, and in a way he kind of was. So he told his story about how he had become a missionary, and that he had this calling on his heart to go reach people in Somalia, and it turned out through all those things that he was actually sent to reach them and remind them that Jesus is real. And they were completely blown away. And then just as sure as they appeared, they kind of vanished afterwards. But he was able to share that with them and give them a Bible. It was a really interesting story.
What if I dare ask, what religion do they practice then, if it's not Christianity?
Oh, they were practicing Christianity in a nation that was in an area that was entirely Muslim and very hostile to Christianity. So they had to kind of practice underground, and he was able to reach them with the gospel, sort of a spiritual serendipity type of thing. And that was quite, because in a sense he was sort of like in a sense, he was called to the mission field, but he didn't know that it was that specific, that he was going to be reaching those 5 guys in particular. So that story was quite remarkable. But my main topic is storms, because I'm sure you've all got various storms, and we tend to pray. I'm sure a lot of us pray about those storms. It's those storms that have us sometimes praying for the first time in a long time, and sometimes things don't happen for us the way that we need them to. I grew up in a church where they talked about prayer as if you could quantify it. If you have faith for something, then the outcome should follow the amount of faith for that thing that requires. So a big event requires big faith, and if it's like if you forget to plug in your car at night and then you wake up in the morning and it doesn't start, well, you didn't charge your battery, therefore it doesn't start. Type of praying, and I have found through the last 30 years that's not how faith works. You can't just expect a positive and a negative charge, and you can have a brand new D-cell battery from Canadian Tire, and sometimes it won't get the motor running. It just, because that's how it's broken. So that sort of faith doesn't really work in the real world. Grandma's brother, Ben, is one of the greatest Christians that I know, with a tremendous faith, and such a role model, and such a charitable person. Ben and Rosa are just so in the Word and so involved in the church, and such strong prayer warriors. But that doesn't keep Ben from slowly dying of bone marrow cancer. Like the rain falls on the just as well. And we've prayed for his healing, and now he's gone from enjoying Christmas time with us to being completely bedridden. And it's really hard to watch someone, such a great person, slowly going down like that. It doesn't gel with our concept of that good things should happen to good people. The gentleman who talked about these with the story from Somalia last night, he talked about this verse in Micah. So there's many times in Israel where the people are sinning against God. They're following these pagan gods, and they're sacrificing, and these kings should be knowing better. And when the prophets for God speak up for the right message, then the kings of Israel, God's chosen people who should know better, these kings of Israel stone and persecute the prophets and people that are speaking against them, the truth. And then the people like Micah and Jeremiah are turning their faces to God and going, what's wrong? How come you've turned a blind eye to injustice here, and you're not doing anything? Why does it have to get to the point where Babylon invades the country and kills all the kings and sells, and puts all the people in captivity? Why does it have to get to that point? Why does it have to be so nasty? And then we read, it's conflicting, because we get the stories in the New Testament where Jesus is in the boat with the disciples. He's going from point A to point B, and it's a calm storm. Jesus delivers the Sermon on the Mount, and it's groundbreaking, and people are, miracles are happening, And then the 12 disciples and Jesus get on this boat to cross the river to go to the other side. And then this storm comes and it's raging. So we'll pick it up. We'll pick it up there right after I find my place here. Okay. I'm reading out of the King James Version because maybe you're as familiar with that as I am. And he entered into a ship and passed over and came into his own city. And behold, ship? Thence and he saw a man named.